My son didn't kill me with a knife. He killed me with a transfer and a caption on Instagram. The morning it happened, my kitchen smelled like old coffee and bleach. The clock over the stove kept ticking with that cheap, relentless click that makes you aware of your own pulse. I was in my cloth armchair, the one I bought when Mike turned 7. After my first decent paycheck cleaning houses up in the hills, when my phone chimed. Available balance, $0. I blinked, as if the screen were a joke waiting to laugh at me. I read it again, and again. The fourth time, my hands started to shake. Not from age. I'm 68 and steady when it matters. No, this was the kind of shaking that comes when your soul understands something your heart refuses to accept. I called the bank. A robot answered first, bright and helpful like a plastic smile, then a human came on. Cool and trained. She asked me security questions. She asked for my mother's maiden name, the nearest cross street, the last deposit amount, as if memory could save me. When we were finally through the hoops, her tone went from polite to procedural. There were several large online wire transfers from your account. Ms. Cole, over the last 24 hours. Totals just over 80,000. 80,000. 30 years of work with a mop and bucket. Stored in small, careful bits. Every skipped dinner. Every pair of shoes I didn't buy. I pressed the phone to my cheek. And the name on the receiving account? I asked, like a woman asking for the time after watching the sunset. There was a pause long enough to raise my blood pressure. It was all transferred to an account under Michael Arthur Cole. Michael, my boy, Mike. Ma'am, the woman went on, flat as paperwork. Do you want to file a fraud report? No, I didn't want to file a fraud report. I wanted to go back 25 years and teach myself a different kind of love. I hung up without answering. Silence filled the house the way water fills a sinking boat. Slow and absolute. The old fluorescent tube in the kitchen buzzed, threatening to die. Outside, the ice cream truck passed with its tinny song, cheerful and cruel in equal measure. I sat in that armchair with the phone burning my palm like a brick just pulled from a fire. My landline rang, the clunky beige one I keep out of habit. Hello, I said, voice flat and somewhere far away. Maggie, honey, did you see Mike's Instagram? That was Betty Jenkins from next door. Always 2 steps ahead of everybody's business. He's in Rome, child, Rome, eating like he's a movie star, with his wife and her mama. Lord, what a life they live. The sound in my ears was like a seashell, distant ocean and pressure. Thanks, Betty, I said. You take care now. I pressed the button and killed the call before the pity could bloom. I'm not much for social media. I like paper receipts and the kind of records you can touch. But I keep an old smartphone in a drawer for emergencies, and I suppose this counted. I turned it on, thumbed the cracked screen, searched for my son like a woman looking through a neighbor's window at a party she wasn't invited to. There he was, Mike Cole, my only child, holding a glass like he was born with crystal between his fingers. He wore a crisp white shirt. Brianna Taylor, was tucked under his arm. Veronica, her mother, stood on the other side, chin tilted, satisfied as a cat after cream. Behind them, Rome, the Colosseum, the sky, history posed like a hired backdrop. The caption read, Rome, my new beginning, I deserve this. In the comments, Bree had written, good things come to those who wait. Thanks for everything, Mama-in-law. A money bag emoji sat there smiling like a punchline. I didn't cry. I didn't scream or break anything. I held the phone and watched the life I paid for toast itself with Italian wine. It's strange, the things that stand out when your heart is cracking. The cuff of his sleeve was a half-inch too long. Bree's lipstick bled a little into the fine lines at the edge of her mouth. Veronica's hand, expensive manicure, counterfeit grace, rested on Mike's shoulder like a stamp of ownership. I could hear Mike's voice from a year ago. Mom, you don't understand the world. Things aren't done like they used to be. Funny thing, the bills are still paid with dollars. And trust is still paid with blood. The clock ticked. The fluorescent buzzed. A dog barked 2 blocks over. I put the phone down on my lap and let the quiet settle. In my mind, the numbers arranged themselves on a long, narrow shelf. 80,000. Every payday tucked away like a secret. Gone in the time it takes a bartender to say, "That will be all?" A week earlier, I'd stood outside Mike's building in Studio City with a tray of fried chicken and collard greens. The way my mother taught me to show up, with food and no expectations. The doorman, crisp in his uniform, had shifted from foot to foot. "Ma'am," he said, not meeting my eyes, "I was instructed not to let you in if you come unannounced." I swallowed my dignity like a dry pill and walked back to the bus stop in the heat. Sweat behind my knees, hurt between my ribs. I mention this because pain rarely arrives alone, it sends you a postcard first. I set the phone on the arm of my chair and let the house introduce itself to me like it was the first time. The chipped edge of the coffee table. The little crack in the wall that looks like a river on a map. The thin curtains letting light through as if it costs extra to block it. On the shelf sat Mike at 5 in a preschool portrait. Mike in a too big middle school blazer. Mike in a cap and gown. Everything I had done with that face in mind. My hands went still. The trembling stopped. The kind of quiet that came over me wasn't the quiet of defeat, it was the quiet of a woman pulling her hair back before she gets to work. I picked up the phone again, opened the banking app, and stared at the tiny river of transactions, the withdrawals, the transfers, the little digital footprints leading straight to my son's name. I wanted to search for a reason that would make me feel better. And I couldn't find a single one that wasn't pathetic. The old landline rang again. I didn't answer. I didn't want to hear another voice tell me what my eyes already confirmed. I wanted to sit with it. To let the truth put its boots on. I thought about the land in Georgia I'd sold when Mike got into college, how I signed away the red dirt my father left me. The dirt I used to promise myself I'd build a cabin on one day. I remembered the engagement ring I pawned to pay for his senior year fees. I remembered swallowing other people's pride for pay and watching their dogs wag their tails like I was part of the furniture. I remembered telling that boy, "Don't you ever forget me. Mike, you don't owe me a house, you owe me sight. See me." He saw right through me. Straight to Rome. Outside, the ice cream music faded. The fluorescent flickered and steadied. I stood up, slow as a cat stretching after a long nap. The house felt older. I suppose I did too. But in a different way, older like a tree ring. Not a broken hinge. I walked to the kitchen. Put water on for tea. And watched the flame. Blue. Steady. Honest. My breath came even. I took my notebook, the one I kept for recipes I never got around to, and wrote in the margin. In my careful, crooked hand. This is not the end. I will not scream. I will count. I closed the book and, for the first time since I saw that beautiful 0, I smiled. Not the kind of smile you give to soothe someone else. Not the polite, church lady smile. No, I smiled the way a woman does when she finally stops arguing with reality. People forget this about silence, it has teeth. I turned the phone face down. In Rome, my son raised a glass over the ruins of an empire. Convinced he'd built something new. Let him toast. Let them all. I've buried enough things in my life to know the difference between a celebration and a funeral. They were already standing at the wrong one. 3 days from that morning, my phone would ring and his voice would come apart like wet paper. "Mom, what did you do?" And I would tell him the truth in the same voice I used when he was little and stubborn and certain he couldn't learn to tie his shoes. "I didn't take anything from you. Son, I just stopped what you were taking from me." But that was 3 days away. On the day my son erased me, I learned something he did not. You don't have to raise your voice to set a fire. You just have to stop feeding someone else's. I wasn't always this quiet. Silence wasn't my nature, it was something I learned. The way some people learn to fight. And others learn to steal. When I was younger, my voice had edges. I could shout, laugh, argue, sing. But life has a way of sanding a woman down. Until her strength hides in her stillness. I was 14 when I first scrubbed floors for strangers. Back then, my hands were small, but already cracked from cheap soap and cold rinse water. I worked in the big houses up in Brentwood, mansions with glass tables that showed every fingerprint. Carpets so white I held my breath walking across them. I cleaned kitchens where women with diamonds on their wrists called their maids by numbers. Not names. My mother didn't wait up for me at night. She'd be asleep by the time I got home. A cigarette still burning in the tray beside her chair. My father had run off years earlier, with a barwoman who smelled like gardenias and stale beer. I didn't cry over that either. Crying never once brought back what was gone. At 17, I got pregnant. The boy was 3 years older than me, handsome in that careless way, full of promises that didn't cost him anything to make. He told me we'd marry, move out of my mother's house, build a better life. He vanished the night he found out it was a boy. No note, no goodbye, just gone, same as my father. I gave birth alone in a public hospital room, with a nurse who called me sweetheart and another who called me irresponsible. The first time I held Michael, my Mike, I thought my chest would break open. I didn't look at his face. I looked at his hands. Tiny fists, new knuckles. I remember thinking, these hands will never have to scrub someone else's floor. I swore it like an oath. I didn't know then that you can promise a child the world, but you can't stop them from trading it. When Mike was little, I taught him games made from detergent caps and broom handles. We had no toys, but we had stories. I'd sing old church songs to him while stirring soup made from water, onion, and hope. On birthdays, I baked cornbread and pretended it was cake. He'd clap like I'd given him a kingdom. I worked every job that paid in dollars and dignity. When he turned 6, one of my employers, a woman with sharp perfume and a lonely look, asked me to live in. She paid me extra to stay in her attic bedroom and clean on call. I said yes, I had to. Mike stayed with my neighbor on weekdays. And every Friday night I rode 3 buses across the city to bring him something, sometimes a notebook, sometimes a toy car from a thrift store, sometimes just my tired arms ready to hold him. He used to run to me shouting, "Mama, Mama." I used to think that sound could cure anything. Funny how wrong we can be. Years went by. Mike grew into his height. His voice. He became too tall to carry, too smart to argue with, too restless to stay beside me. I learned to write my name so I could sign his school forms. I learned to read enough to check his homework, though half the time I guessed. I wasn't educated the way other mothers were, but I was present, or so I believed. When he turned 16, he told me, one day, "Mama, I'll buy you a house where winter doesn't come through the walls." I told him, "Don't buy me nothing, boy, just don't forget me." I should have asked for less. Then came college. He got accepted. I was so proud I couldn't speak. I sold the only piece of land I'd ever owned, the red patch in Georgia my father left me. I'd dreamed of a cabin there, a garden, maybe a porch swing. I sold it for tuition. I sold my dreams so he could build his. Was that a mistake? People ask that sometimes. They don't ask it aloud, but I see it in their eyes. Would you still give everything if you knew how it would end? My answer is unfair and honest. I would give it again. But this time, I'd keep the receipts. He went off to school, and I waited for the man I believed he would become. He came home with someone else instead, a young woman named Bree Taylor. Straight hair, smooth voice, a smile like she practiced it in mirrors. Her mother Veronica followed close behind, all pearls and pretension. The first time they stepped into my house, Bree glanced at my kitchen and whispered, "This looks like a shelter, not a home." Veronica laughed through her nose and said, "What a lovely shade, very rustic." That word stung, rustic, like I was a barn someone forgot to paint. I smiled. I always smiled. Women like me are trained to smile through humiliation. But a piece of me cracked that day, small, but audible. Little by little, they drew Mike away from me. At first, it was subtle. "We're busy this weekend, Mama." Then, "Call before you drop by." Eventually, "She doesn't feel comfortable with surprise visits." The wife replaced the mother without ever saying so. But I heard it all. You see, betrayal is never loud at the start. It tiptoes. It rearranges chairs. It locks doors you once had the key to. By the time it slams the door in your face, it's already made itself at home. Mike started talking like a man who'd forgotten his origin. Talking about modern life. Talking about space. Talking about baggage. As if a mother is luggage. As if love weighs down ambition. I'm telling you all this so you'll understand one thing. When I saw $0 in that account, It wasn't a lightning strike. It was a thunder I'd been hearing for years, coming slow across the plains. I didn't lose my son in a single day. I lost him inch by inch, comment by comment, dinner by dinner. By the time he took my money, he had already taken my place in his memory. You might ask, why didn't I fight? Why didn't I confront him sooner? Because women like me are taught that endurance is love, that if you hold on long enough, they'll realize everything you carried. But here's the truth I waited too long to learn. What you allow is what will continue, and what continues will eventually consume you. I wasn't always this quiet, but the day I found out he emptied my bank account, I shut my mouth to sharpen my silence. I was done pleading. I was done excusing. I was done being unseen. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just his mother. I was a witness. You don't wake up one morning and find the roof on the ground. First you notice a draft, then a drip, then a dark spot spreading in a corner you don't look at often. Betrayal is like that, slow, patient, and polite until it isn't. The first draft came months before the $0. It was a missing envelope. I used to get my bank statements in the mail because paper feels like proof. 1 month it didn't show. I told myself the mailman misdelivered. The next month it didn't come either. Go paperless, Mike had said a year earlier, tapping my phone like he was teaching a child to clap. It's better for the environment. I nodded because I wanted to be the kind of mother who keeps up with the world. With her son. Paperless is easy if your son is your secretary. It's dangerous if your son becomes your editor. After the second missing envelope, I went to the mailbox each day with a little prickle along my spine. Bills came. Coupons came. A newsletter from the health clinic came with a calendar of free flu shots. No statement. I called the bank and they told me I'd successfully opted into electronic notices. Successfully. That word made me smile on the inside the way you do when something bumps your bruise. When did I opt in? Who clicked for me? Success is a funny shape in some mouths. Little things kept asking for room in my head. A receipt that didn't match the groceries I bought. A letter about a life insurance policy I didn't remember authorizing. I told myself there must have been a promotion. A bonus. Some member benefit I had clicked by accident. Clicks become signatures in this new world. Fingers become pens. I have hands made for mops and dough. I don't trust fingers that leave no ink. There was the day I stood in the lobby of Mike's building with a foil-covered tray. Fried chicken and collard greens. The way he likes, skin blistered just right. Greens heavy with garlic and a memory of bacon. The doorman wore a face that had practiced saying no. Ma'am, he said, and somehow that word can make you feel old if someone throws it hard enough. I was instructed not to let you up without prior approval. The words arranged themselves like neat suitcases between us. Instructed. Not to let you. Prior approval. By who? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I couldn't say. Ma'am, that's the policy. Policy is another word for, I put bars on this door and gave the key to someone else. I stood in that lobby for 2 hours because dignity is stubborn and hunger is patient. I waited for Mike to come down. He didn't. I watched a woman in leggings walk past me with a tiny dog in a sweater. The dog looked sorry for me. She didn't. I took the bus home with the tray still warm against my knees. When a mother carries food no one will eat. It weighs more than it should. On the ride, the city looked like a place I didn't live in but had cleaned for years. Glass. Screens. People speaking into the air. I reminded myself that love is not measured by doorways you can pass through. Then I reminded myself again because reminding is its own kind of labor. That night, Betty Jenkins knocked on my door with a pecan pie and 2 paper cups of coffee. Betty is the kind of woman who keeps a pie ready the way other women keep umbrellas. She sat at my table and looked around like a nurse taking a pulse. You've always been strong, Maggie, she said, testing the floor where my pride stood. Don't let this break your heart. Do children ever regret it? Betty? I asked. My voice surprised me. It sounded like I'd been walking uphill all day. Sure they do, she said quickly, maybe too quickly. When their mothers aren't around no more. They learn. They always learn. I hope it's not too late when he does. I said. Then we ate pie we couldn't taste and drank coffee that went cold while we were holding it. After Betty left, I took out my old notebook, the one with recipes and numbers and the kind of lists that make a poor woman feel prepared, and I started a new page. Things that don't add up, I wrote, and underlined it twice because I like the authority a line gives you. I listed the missing statements. The life insurance letter. The receipt with the wrong total. Nothing dramatic, just facts. Facts are the only friends who don't gossip. I didn't confront Mike, not yet. I'm not sure whether that was wisdom or cowardice. I wanted to believe that what I was seeing could still be something else. I wanted to give him the courtesy of the boy he used to be. I wanted to see him through that old lens where a son can do wrong without being a wrongdoer. If you're listening and judging me, I don't blame you. You don't know what it's like to be a mother until your child does something you wouldn't forgive in anyone else. Bree called a few times to coordinate. That was her word for telling me when I was allowed to see my son. She had the kind of voice that smiles while it pries open a lock. We're slammed with work right now, Maggie, she'd say, sweet as store-bought tea. We'll let you know when we have a window. A window, like I was weather trying to get in. Mike started speaking in new shapes too. Mom, you don't have to worry about the boring stuff. He'd say, Bree and I have systems. We're modern. Modern is a word people use when they've decided the old rules don't apply to them. The old rules were simple: don't lie. Don't steal. Don't forget who fed you when no one else would. If modern means you get to rewrite those, I prefer ancient. Small injuries piled up like receipts. He missed my call on the night of my checkup. He texted, "Love you," without punctuation on my birthday. He asked me once if I still needed the car title in my name because it made refinancing harder for him. I told him yes. He sighed and said, "You don't understand how things work." Mom, he was right and wrong in the same sentence. I didn't understand how his things worked. I understood exactly how mine did. One Sunday, Bree hosted a family lunch at a restaurant where the waiter had a menu. She never said I wasn't welcome. She said, "It might be better if we ease into all being together." Like I was a complication to be gradually absorbed. I went anyway. I watched Bree order for Mike. I watched Veronica correct the server like she was auditioning to be rich. I waited for a moment when my son's eyes would find mine with the old ease. They didn't. After dessert, I put my fork down and asked him quietly, "Are you sure this woman is right for you? Have you noticed how she talks about me when I'm not around?" The air changed like weather. Bree looked up from her phone. Veronica came back from the restroom at that exact second. Timing that felt intentional even if it wasn't. Mike's face closed. He said, louder than he needed to, "That's enough. You're jealous because there's another woman in my life now. You think it. You just won't say it." I didn't defend myself. I set my napkin on the table like it was something fragile I didn't want to break. I left before the check arrived. On the walk home, I kept thinking about that word, jealous, like it was a stain I couldn't get out. Jealous? I had held that boy through fevers and heartbreaks. Jealous? I had slept standing up on buses so he could have shoes with air in them. Jealous? Of what? Of losing what I had already lost. After that lunch, the dark spot on the ceiling grew. The mail kept forgetting me. The digital successes multiplied. I started visiting the bank website on my phone when I couldn't sleep. Scrolling through lines of transactions I didn't make. Not yet seeing the pattern. Only sensing the tilt. I also started sleeping better in a strange way. Once you admit the draft is a draft, you stop blaming the cold on your bones. I made tea at odd hours and listened to the house breathe. The clock ticked. The fluorescent hummed. Somewhere on the next block. A dog lost its temper every night at 10. I wrote in my notebook, "Sometimes love is the alibi for our own neglect." Under it I added, "Watch, don't warn." That became my new rule. I would watch, not accuse, not plead, not remind. I would watch my own life like it belonged to a woman I wanted to protect. And if I'm being honest, the moment I made that decision, something in me stood up straight. I stopped crouching inside myself to fit the shape other people gave me. I was still his mother. But I had become something else. Too, the guardian of my own future. The night before the $0, I lay awake listening to the steam whistle from the kettle I forgot on the stove. The sound took me back to my first days in those big houses, me learning the names of cleaners, the seasons of stains, the physics of other people's dirt. I remember thinking, I will not be invisible forever. It turns out forever arrives in episodes, not seasons. Mine was about to start a new one. In the morning, the phone would chime, and the numbers would spell out what my bones already knew. But in those last hours before the flood, I wasn't afraid, I was alert. There's a difference. Fear makes you bargain, alertness makes you prepare. So I wrote one more line in my notebook before I slept: if I must be quiet, let it be a quiet that counts. I didn't know then that my silence would lead me to the ugliest truth a mother can face, not what her child did with his hands, but what he planned on paper. Sam didn't pour coffee when I arrived. He just looked at me like a man who'd already guessed the end of the story and wished he hadn't. His apartment smelled faintly of old paper and lemon oil. Files lived here, not decorations. He motioned to the wooden chair by his kitchen table and waited for me to sit before he did. "Tell me why you came," he said. I didn't waste syllables. I slid a folded document across the table and set my finger on the bottom corner like I was pinning a snake. "Read," I said. He opened it carefully, the way men open letters from the court or from women they loved once. His eyes moved line by line, slower with each pass. Twice he went back to the beginning. When he reached the signature, he looked at me and then at the page again, as if the ink might confess if he held it under enough light. "Maggie," he said finally, voice flat the way a judge sounds before he chooses a sentence. "This isn't your signature." "I know," I said. My throat was dry, but someone decided it would be. When the time came. He kept reading. The title at the top might as well have been a tombstone. Last Will and Testament of Margaret Cole. It listed my address, my full name, a neat summary of my assets, and instructions that, upon my death, everything should pass to Michael Arthur Cole. It even had a witness line with a scrawl I didn't recognize, and a notary seal that looked like it had behaved itself for several other crimes. Sam placed the pages on the table as if they might bruise. "Where did you find this?" I let out a small breath that wasn't relief. Under my armchair. I was sweeping and shifted it to get at the dust bunnies. There was a torn plastic bag wedged under the leg. Inside, this. I tapped the fake will. If I hadn't moved the chair, I would have thrown the bag out without looking. He closed his eyes, not in prayer, just in disbelief. "Who else has been in your house?" "Maggie?" "Plenty of people over the years," I said, "but only one person who treats my life like it's a form to be filled out." He nodded, not agreeing so much as acknowledging gravity. He picked up a magnifier he kept in a drawer and examined the signatures again. "They didn't even try to get your hand right," he said quietly. "They just needed something that looked like a name." The room was very still. My heart beat like a slow drum. I had thought emptiness was the worst feeling. I was wrong. No feeling is worse than discovery coming right on time. "I don't think this has been filed," he said, shuffling the pages into a square stack. "It reads like a draft. But a dangerous one. Where there's a draft, there's an intention. Where there's an intention, there's usually a plan." "I didn't bring it to you so you'd soothe me," I said. "I brought it so you'd tell me what it is." He took off his glasses, folded them, and set them down. "It's forgery," he said. "It's elder financial exploitation in progress. And if this is here, I'd bet a month's pension there are other documents somewhere. Or at least other steps. Joint accounts, authorization forms, things that look small until they're large." There it was, the bone-deep word. Exploitation. I didn't flinch because I had no flinch left to give. "I need you to look at my banking," I said. "What I can't see, you'll see. I'm tired of guessing." He nodded and turned the legal dial inside himself. I watched it happen, the man I'd kissed under a county fair string light 100 years ago becoming the man who spent a lifetime catching wolves by their paperwork. "Bring me what you have," he said. "Logins, printed statements, any letters that didn't make sense. We'll pull a full record. We'll document line by line." I reached into my bag and handed him a stack I'd prepared, a folder with my scribbled list from the notebook. A few receipts, And 3 printed screenshots Linda had taught me to take on my phone. I hadn't asked Linda to read them yet. Pride is heavy, even when it helps you stand. Sam flipped through them. These are transfers, he said, tapping a page. Recurring, similar amounts, followed by larger wires. See this? The pattern is a ramp. Small motions to test the fence. Then the run. I watched his finger land on a line that had my son's name woven through it like a hair in soup. Can someone open a joint account in my name without me? I asked, already knowing the answer because the world had already told me. With a forged signature and a clerk who doesn't look harder than his shift requires. Yes, he said, if they also changed your mailing preferences, you'd never see the paper trail. If they changed your email notifications, you'd never hear the alarm. I thought of the missing envelopes. The cheerful, successful, on the bank's voice. The way Bree's voice turned sweet when she was closing a door. They didn't plan to steal from me, I said, speaking slowly so I wouldn't betray myself to anything but truth. They planned to inherit me while I was still alive. Sam stared at the pages like he wanted them to be lies. Maggie, he said, softer now, the lawyer stepping aside for the man. Do you want me to handle this? To file what needs filing? It won't be quick. It won't be pleasant. But we can put up walls. We can freeze flows. We can make anyone who touches your money put their name on it big and bold. Tell me the cost, I said. Pride, he said, without smiling. Time, patience, and for a while, people will think you're cruel. I pushed the chair back, stood, and felt the small bones in my feet resist the floor. Let them, I said. I've been mistaken for all kinds of things. Cruel is just honest in a dress most folks don't like. He picked up a pen. We'll start with a fraud affidavit, he said. We'll notarize your statement that this will is not yours. We'll flag your accounts and request monitoring for elder abuse. If there's a joint account, we'll demand proof of your consent. If they can't produce it, we'll challenge. We'll also check the county recorder for any property filings. Sometimes, people get greedy and try to put their names on titles before the body's even cold. Check, I said. The word felt like the click of a safety. He looked at me a long time. Are you all right? I'm awake, I said. That's better than all right. We signed what needed signing in that moment. And I left with copies in a manila envelope, weighty. Yes, but not as heavy as the one I'd carried in alone. Outside, the air had that stale sweetness Los Angeles gets in the late afternoon. Like a bakery that forgot to open. On the bus home, the city looked more honest. I saw the cracks and called them cracks. I saw the shine and named it glass. I held the fake will on my lap and thought about the day I made the last mortgage payment on my house, my hand shaking while I wrote the check. The teller placing a stamp on it with a thunk that sounded like applause. 30 years of elbows and knees and overtime for a roof that didn't leak. The idea that my own child might try to own it with paperwork did something to me that tears couldn't touch. Back in my kitchen, I set the envelope beside the notebook. I boiled water, watched the first bubble, the second, the roiling many. I wrote, he didn't just empty my account. He tried to erase my right to exist. Then under it, smaller, we'll see whose name survives. I pulled the armchair forward again and stared at the place where the bag had been hidden. Dust had settled there like it was proud. I swept it clean, slow and deliberate, the way a woman sweeps before company. Even if the company is only grief. The chair creaked when I sat. The house breathed. My silence didn't feel like defeat anymore. It felt like a hammer. I didn't chase him. Let the boy have his roam. Let him toast the ruins with strangers and call it victory. Some lessons don't land until your shoes are wet and the map is wrong. I watched their trip the way you watch a parade from behind a fence, everything loud and bright and a little ridiculous. They posted a photo every few hours because happiness that's real doesn't need that many witnesses. Bree loved an angle, her chin tilted, her hand curled around a stemmed glass. Sunglasses that pretended they cost more than her conscience. Veronica stood like she was queen of something small, 2 steps behind. One eyebrow lifted, mouth always ready to grade the world. Mike looked expensive. That was the first word that came to me. Not joyful, not peaceful, expensive. There's a look men get when their clothes are new but borrowed from the future. They wear the price tag in the eyes. He posed by the Colosseum like it belonged to him. A caption said, "When in Rome, build a new life," as if history were a retail store. I've never been to Rome. I've only seen it in movies and in other people's bragging. But I know tourist cities by smell. They all sell the same thing. The idea that if you stand where the famous dead once stood, you'll be less afraid of dying. People forget that ruins are just success with the paint scraped off. They forget how many hands bled for those arches. They forget until someone like me pays for their plane ticket. They ordered plates of food they couldn't pronounce. They took a video of Veronica biting into something and closing her eyes like she was tasting her own importance. In the background, Mike laughed the loud laugh men use when they're trying to sound bigger than their doubt. Bree wrote under the video, "To beginnings." I almost replied, "To endings you can't see yet." But I kept my fingers still. Silence has its own grammar. I had already learned the verbs. Back in Los Angeles, I did things you can't post on Instagram because they don't look like anything. I went to the county recorder's office and asked a tired man with kind eyes to check for filings under my name. He typed with 2 fingers. Slow and careful, the way some people pray. There was an attempt to add an additional name to your property. He said, peering at the screen, "Rejected on a technicality, missing notarization." He didn't say "lucky you," but it was there in his blink. I walked home a different route that day. The city smelled like hot tar and oranges from a vendor's cart. A child dragged a plastic dinosaur by its tail. I thought about signatures, the ones we learn, the ones they fake, the ones life stamps on you without asking. I thought about the last mortgage check I'd written and how the teller's stamp sounded like a door locking behind a thief who'd just run out. I thought about the draft will under my chair, the one that wanted to turn me into a ghost with good timing. That night, I made rice and beans and ate at the sink the way I do when the table looks too formal for one. I scrolled their photos again because sometimes pain needs a second look to turn into decision. Bree posted a boomerang of a coin tossed into a fountain. Manifesting, she wrote. I whispered to my empty kitchen. Baby, you can't manifest character. You can only meet it. Mike posted a story of a street violinist. The music was thin through the phone speaker. He captioned it, "Feels like destiny." I wondered whose. I wondered if he recognized that for the first time in his life, he was far from anyone who would save him from himself. The next morning, I sat with Linda Harris at her kitchen table. Her calculator clicked like a small clock. We laid out my printed screenshots beside her legal pad. She walked me through my own accounts as if guiding me through a house someone had rearranged while I slept. "See these?" she said, tapping with her pen. "They're test pulls. They start small so the system ignores them. Then they get bolder." She circled dates that matched dinners, visits, calls, all the ordinary days I might have confused with kindness. "And here," she said, "this is where the money learned to run." I didn't ask how to fix it yet. I wanted to understand the shape of the harm before I tried to break it. Linda was gentle in the way practical people are, no performance. "Just respect. You didn't fail," she said, without looking up. "They cheated." I nodded and added a line to my notebook when I got home. "Cheating is just lying with training." In Rome, they took a photo on a stone street at dusk. Bree in a red dress. Veronica wrapped in a scarf that wanted to be silk. Mike with his arm around Bree like she was a trophy he needed to hold up so the crowd wouldn't forget to clap. The caption said, "Grateful." The comments were full of hearts. I stared at the picture and wondered which moment I was looking at, the one before a storm or the one after? Because the sky has the same color for both if you frame it right. People asked me later if I wished I had warned him sooner. If I had called and yelled and told him, "Come home, boy, before the ground opens." The truth is I wanted him to stay exactly where he was until the ground told him itself. My warnings had become background noise to him. He needed the front row. I did my errands like a woman packing for a trip no one can see. I went to the bank branch, not the phone, not the website, and sat across from a woman who wore kindness like a uniform and competence like a weapon. She helped me submit the elder fraud affidavits Sam had drafted. She explained the process in clear steps. And I appreciated that almost as much as the paper itself. It may take time, she said, but flags are in motion. Activity will be watched. I thanked her and left. Outside, the jacaranda trees were shedding purple like confetti from a party I hadn't attended. On the third day of their trip, Mike posted a photo of a plate of pasta and wrote, "This is what freedom tastes like." I'm not petty by nature. But that sentence made me laugh out loud, one sharp sound that surprised me. Freedom doesn't taste like butter and salt. Freedom tastes like sleep you earned and a chair that is yours and a key that turns because you paid for the lock. Freedom tastes like the day your last bill is smaller than your first dream. He had never learned the flavor of it because I had been seasoning his life for him. That evening I closed my eyes and pictured him walking streets that would not remember his name. Rome has seen emperors and beggars come and go, it will not keep his secrets or his selfies. I pictured Bree talking too close to the phone on a balcony. Her voice pitched low and mean. Because cruelty likes an audience that it can pretend is confidant. I pictured Veronica adding up numbers in her head that didn't include me as human. I didn't imagine disasters. I didn't pray for them either. I don't need God to punish my son to prove he loves me. I only asked for truth to keep its appointments. Before I went to bed, I sat at the armchair where I'd found the plastic bag. I touched the wood like it was a shoulder. The room hummed. I wrote one more sentence in the red notebook I'd started for this new life. Sometimes you let a child walk into a mirror so he can learn what breaks. I underlined it because I wanted it to stand up on its own. The next day, the photos slowed. The angles got sloppy. The captions turned short. In one, Bree's smile missed her eyes. In another, Mike held his phone too tight. It's a strange gift. Being a mother, you can read your child's face through bad Wi-Fi. I saw the shift before he did. I watched the performance start to slip. The way makeup slides under lights. And I waited. Because that's what my silence had become, not surrender. Not sulking. Not even strategy so much as patience sharpened into purpose. Let him have his Rome. I told myself, rinsing a cup and setting it on the rack. Let him drink the wine he chose. The glass always empties, the bill always arrives, and when it did, I intended to be the one person in his world who wouldn't argue with the price. The first crack was small, a sound digital things make when they pretend to be solid. I saw it in a photo before he felt it in his pocket. The pictures from Rome began to come slower. The captions shorter. Bree's smile missed its landing. Mike's hand gripped the phone like a man holding on to the rail of a ship in the wrong sea. Then came the inevitable. A story where the camera shook slightly as he filmed a waiter return a black leather folder. It cut off before the end. 10 minutes later, Bree posted a boomerang that didn't loop clean. The angle showed just enough to tell the truth to anyone who knew how to read it. The handheld terminal. The little screen. The word every reckless plan meets sooner or later, declined. I didn't celebrate. I washed my cup and put it upside down on the rack. Justice isn't a party, it's a closing shift. The next day, there were no photos until late afternoon. One finally came, Bree on a balcony. Sunglasses on though the sun had gone down. Lips tight around a straw. The caption said nothing. Another followed, Veronica, alone at a cafe table. Scrolling with narrow eyes. No family pose. No toast. Just 3 people sitting near each other and far from themselves. Flags don't freeze an account all at once. They narrow it. They pull ropes one at a time until the tent sags. The first rope was international charges flagged for review. The second was a freeze on outgoing wires tied to my affidavit. The third was a note on Mike's name at the bank level, elder abuse monitor attached. There was a fourth rope waiting for the moment he set foot back home. But that belonged to another office with a colder lobby. Near midnight in Rome, afternoon for me, a new post appeared and vanished, a clip of Bree turning on him in the street. Voice sharpened to hurt. You could only hear pieces. Told you not to trust your charity case mother? A passerby stared into the lens as if to say, "We've seen this show." Then the clip was gone. Deleting is just confession without the paperwork. By evening I'd finished what Sam asked. He had my signed fraud affidavit. Copies notarized. The bank had placed holds where holds could live. The county office had confirmed the failed title stunt. The IRS contact Sam knew had done what he could do quietly. A watch on larger movement tied to my report. Not a trap but a tripwire. It was enough. I put the manila envelopes into my drawer, closed it, and made dinner from what was honest in my fridge. That night, I slept. Not long, but soundly. When I woke, I opened the red notebook and wrote, "If the dam holds, the river will do the rest." Then I set the kettle on and waited for the water to tell me it was ready. He called while it was heating. The name appeared on my old landline's tiny green screen, Mike. I let it ring once, twice, a third time, and picked up on the fourth because Mercy doesn't have to hurry. "Mom." His voice had air in it, like he'd been running in place. "Mom, what did you do?" He wasn't my son on that call. He was just a man meeting his consequences. "Who is this?" I asked, because form matters even in a family. He took a breath that sounded like a bruise. "Mom, it's me." They froze everything. The cards keep getting declined. The bank says there's a hold on transfers. They're talking about an investigation. Bree's furious. Veronica says, he stopped. As if the next words had too much salt to swallow. She says you did this. The kettle began to hum. I turned the flame down until the whistle quieted to a steady warning. "I didn't take anything from you, son," I said, each word laid on the table where even a liar could inventory it. "I only stopped what you were taking from me." Silence on the line, not the empty kind, the kind you can stand on. "I borrowed it," he said, smaller. "We were going to put it back. We just needed to get ahead. You don't understand how it is for us, rent, investments, the cost of." "Stop," I said. "Don't sell me a vocabulary for theft." He tried a different door. "I'm in trouble. They said something about elder financial abuse." I finished for him. "That's what it's called when a grown man empties his mother's account and buys a view he can't afford. That's what it's called when someone forges a signature to make sure a woman dies into his pocket." I heard him flinch even through the wire. "A will?" he whispered. "Mom, I didn't." "Don't finish that sentence unless you're ready to read what I found out loud to a stranger," I said. "There are some lies that stain." Another silence. Longer. Then the voice I remembered from years ago, the boy who used to ask if monsters were real, came through the wreckage. "What am I supposed to do?" "Learn," I said. A small sound. Something between disbelief and a laugh that forgot how. "Bree, she left. Veronica too. They went to a different hotel. They say I brought bad luck. They say I smell like you." That last sentence tried to bleed me. It didn't. I put a hand on the counter to remind my body where I was. "Luck is for gamblers," I said. "You made choices. Now you meet them." "Mom, please," he said, and the word please felt like a counterfeit bill, real shape. "Wrong ink. You need to call the number the embassy gave you," I said. "You will sign whatever separates my accounts from your hands. You will answer what they ask. You will come home and speak to whoever their paper points you to. You will stop pretending this happened to you." "That's it," he said. The old entitlement trying to stand up one more time. "You're not going to help me?" "I am helping you," I said. "I'm not saving you." He breathed like a man in a narrow hallway. "Do you still?" He stopped. Started again. "Do you still love me?" I looked out the window at the jacaranda blooming purple over a street that needed resurfacing. Love is not a faucet. It doesn't turn off because the sink leaks. But love also isn't a mop forever. "I love you," I said. "That's why the money is frozen." He made another small sound. And I heard roam behind him, distant scooters. A voice selling something in a language older than either of us. "I don't have anywhere to sleep tonight," he said. "You will find somewhere," I said. "You always have." "Mama," he said then, reaching for a word he had retired. "The mouth knows the real names when the roof surrenders. I'm scared." "Good," I said. "Not cruel, just honest. That feeling has chapters. Read each one." The kettle clicked off. The line hummed. "Okay," he said at last. A boy prayer buried under a man's wreck. "Okay. Goodbye, Mike," I said. "Mom." I hung up, not because I wanted to hurt him, but because the conversation had ended and the habit of letting him keep talking past the end was how we both got here. The house returned to itself, the clock. The low hum of the refrigerator. The sound of my own breath. Unsurprised, I poured the hot water over a tea bag, watched the brown bloom, and sat. I wrote in the red notebook, he called. I answered. I did not rescue. Under it, I added, mercy without boundaries is just a leaky roof. On the television I never turn on before dinner. A local anchor's voice floated through a neighbor's window, talking about travel delays and embassy backlogs. I thought of him in a chair somewhere white and metal, filling out forms, learning the taste of paperwork, the only honest currency left when charm breaks. I didn't feel triumph. I felt the right size. Like a woman in her own house, with her own name on the deed, and her own quiet doing what it was designed to do, draw the line. Hold the line, and let the river carry what shouldn't have crossed. I didn't schedule a last act. I scheduled a checkup. The clinic smelled like disinfectant and gum someone had been chewing too long. A television on the wall played the news with the sound off. And a strip of fluorescent lights made everyone look a little more tired than they admitted. I brought my small notebook because I always bring it, names of pills. Blood pressure readings. Questions I forget as soon as a man in a white coat asks how I'm doing. He didn't say how are you that day. He said my name twice. Ms. Cole, Ms. Cole. Then he sat down and put a paper in front of him like he needed a prop to hold the weight of the words. You have leukemia, he said. It's advanced. He waited. People always wait, as if your reaction is a test they have to grade. I looked at the bird-shaped water stain on the far wall and then back at him. Will it take my life faster? Not necessarily, he said carefully. There are options. Chemotherapy. It's aggressive. It can add time, but there are side effects. We'd have to start soon. I thought about time like a bill. I've paid enough of them to know the difference between buying something and renting the right to say you still have it. No, I said. He blinked, not offended, just surprised at the quiet. No? I won't let death catch me in a hospital gown, I said. If it wants me, it can find me at home with my name on the mailbox. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, speaking softly because soft is what they're taught to use when facts get sharp. Are you sure? Yes. I wrote one line in my notebook to make the decision real on paper. No chemo. Keep dignity. Then I closed the book. He told me about palliative care. Numbers I didn't want. Signs to watch for. I listened. I asked for a printed list. I stood up. He stood up. He offered his hand with the mixture of pity and respect men wear when a woman refuses false hope in their office. 6 months. Maybe, he said at the door. Because doctors understand people need a number to point at when their world slips. I'm sorry. It's all right, I said. I'm not. I walked home instead of taking the bus. The city felt clearer. The bakery on the corner was selling day-old bread at half price. A teenager on a bike cut too close and didn't apologize. A woman in scrubs sat on a stoop with her head in her hands and laughed into her palms like if she didn't. She'd scream. Life was stubborn. So was I. When I got home, I put the paper from the doctor in the drawer with the manila envelopes. The folders looked like a row of small doors. Behind one, elder fraud. Behind another, forged will. Behind a third, my blood going wrong. I added a fourth door, my will, the real one. Then I made tea and stood in the doorway while the kettle whistled. Like a person listening for a train they already know is late. I called Sam and told him the medical part because a lawyer who walks beside you through one kind of ending deserves to know when another is coming. He was quiet for a full breath. You want me to talk you into treatment? He asked. No. Then I won't try, he said, and that's why I called him. We'll finish the filings. We'll set anything that needs your signature in front of you this week. Good, I said. I want all the paperwork to be bored when it looks at my name. Linda came by with soup. She didn't ask questions that pretend to be kindness. She ladled the soup into a bowl and left the pot on my stove with the flame low because simmering is the opposite of panic. You need anything? She asked. Yes, a witness, I said. 2, actually, for my will. She nodded. Say when. That night I took the mirror from the bedroom and leaned it against the bathroom sink. I didn't do it for drama. I did it because I don't like hair falling in my eyes when I'm working. And the next weeks were going to be work. I took the sewing scissors from the drawer, gathered my hair in my left hand, and cut. Then I cut again. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. Hair fell into the sink like gray rain and made a soft circle around the drain. When I was done, I cleaned the scissors, wiped the mirror, and took the trash out. It was just a task. I slept with my head bare and felt the pillow for what it was. In the morning, the air on my scalp was cool. Honest. I looked more like myself than I had in years, a woman without decorations. At Sam's the next day, we signed what needed signing. He read each paragraph aloud and I initialed each page because initials are a way to say I was here on purpose. We filed the affidavit about the forged will with a notary who stamped my name like a judge's gavel. We updated the fraud report with the bank, additional documentation, verified, signatures, dates. We sent a letter to the county recorder asking to be notified of any attempt to touch my title. We added the IRS case number to the folder with a paperclip because order is a kind of kindness to your future self. Are you ready for the noise? Sam asked when we finished. Sometimes justice is loud on its way to being quiet. I was born into noise, I said. I learned to work beside it. Back home, I drafted my real will in my careful, crooked hand and then typed it on Linda's old computer because the court respects neatness. I left the house to Mike if he ever learned to live without taking. I left a small sum to Betty for pies she never charged me for. I left the red notebook to no one in particular because some books are for reading and some are for remembering the person who wrote them. I signed it before two witnesses, Linda and Betty, who didn't smile and didn't shake. Which is how you know you picked the right ones. Then I opened the red notebook and wrote, he emptied my account. Life emptied my time. Only I decide which matters more. Below it, I seek justice. Not vengeance. Justice lets me leave clean. Bree didn't call. Veronica didn't either. Mike sent a short message from a number the embassy must have provided. Appointment. Forms. Coming home. I didn't answer. Courts don't text the defendant between hearings. The embassy allowed me to attend the appointment as a witness. Not a mother. Sam arranged that because Sam knows doors and the people who hold them. I bought a plane ticket with money I could account for and sold my blender and my large living room mirror to balance the page. I packed one skirt, two blouses, my scarf, my notebook, and copies of everything. I left the bedroom as if I might return in an hour. The way people do when they actually mean goodbye but can't afford the ritual. Before dawn on travel day, I sat in the armchair one more time. The place where the plastic bag had been hidden was clean now. The chair creaked its old complaint. I put my palm flat on its arm. You've held me, I said, not to the chair. Not exactly. Hold him now, if he chooses to sit. I locked the door, checked the handle twice, and stepped into the morning. The air had that washed-out blue you only see before the buses wake. A cat crossed the street with the confidence of a creature that belongs to no one and nothing. I matched my breath to my steps. I wasn't rehearsing speeches. I wasn't practicing forgiveness. I had signed what I had to sign and cut what I had to cut. The rest was a room in a building in a foreign city where a man with my last name would use a pen he didn't deserve to return what he should never have taken. People say they want more time. I wanted the time I had left to count. And counting, I'd learned, is a quiet skill. Airports don't need to be beautiful. They just need to work. I wasn't there for beauty anyway. I was there for a transaction, a woman returning her name to herself. Sam got there a day before me. Because he knows how paper moves when people are paid to stall it. He sent a message with the address, the time, and a reminder. Witness. Not mother. I replied with a single word, copy. At the embassy gate they took my phone, my scarf pin, and my patience, then returned 2 out of 3. The guard stamped a visitor badge and waved me through. Inside, it was all polished floors and fluorescent honesty. Rooms with windows to nowhere. Chairs that didn't invite you to stay. Posters about citizenship and warnings about scams. I almost laughed. The world was telling jokes it didn't know it was telling. I sat in a metal chair that turned your back into a ruler. Sam met my eye from across the room and gave a small nod. The kind men use in court when the witness shows up sober and on time. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. We had already done all the touching that mattered, with signatures. Bree arrived first, 15 minutes late and dressed for a place that sells cameras. Not visas. Sunglasses like a dare. A coat the color of new lipstick. She chewed gum and looked around as if she could buy an exit with attitude. Veronica trailed behind, pearls tight at her throat. Face set in permanent evaluation. They walked as if gravity worked less on them. It doesn't. Bree clocked me and smiled the way a cat smiles at a bird in a cage. Well, she said, dropping into a chair a row over. If it isn't the philanthropist. Veronica added, I suggest you reconsider whatever you've done. These processes can be corrected. If a person knows how to speak the right language. I do, I said, truth. They didn't like that answer. It doesn't tip well. Mike came last. He looked like a man who'd been sleeping badly in expensive rooms, stubble like a confession. Shirt clean but wrinkled where hands had grabbed it. He saw me and stopped. As if someone had pulled an invisible cord. For a second, the boy he had been flickered behind his eyes. Then the man returned and looked down. The clerk called his name. Michael Cole? The syllables echoed. He stood. I stood too. And the clerk gestured me forward. You may observe, she said, you're listed as the aggrieved party. Aggrieved. A good word, legal and accurate. A word with a backbone. We went into a small room with white walls and metal chairs and a table that had been wiped one time too many. A second clerk sat behind a monitor. The forms were already printed. Thick as a thin book. The clerk spoke with that careful rhythm people use when they need to be understood by those who don't want to listen. These are the documents to separate the subject from joint authorization on accounts ending in, she read the last digits. And to affirm the subject's lack of rights over said funds pending further review. The subject will initial each page and sign at the end. The complainant may witness. Questions? Bree snapped first. Yes. What happens to our trip, our charges? Our hotel, when you freeze everything? We're stranded because of her. The clerk looked at Bree's reflection in the blank monitor screen. Ma'am, this is not your appointment. Veronica leaned forward and tried the voice she uses on waiters. Surely there is a way to unfreeze some funds. My son-in-law is the subject of an active elder financial exploitation report. The clerk said, without raising her tone. Please take your seats. Sam's face didn't change. He has the gift of stillness. Mine stayed still for a different reason. I was tired of watching people perform for small gods. Mike's hand hovered over the pen like it needed permission that wouldn't come. He sat, took a breath, and began to initial. The sound of the pen on paper was the only music in the room. His signature looked twice as old as his face. Bree waited 3 signatures before starting again. Maggie, she said, sweetening my name with poison. What's the plan here? To humiliate your own family? To go viral as the sainted victim? She laughed to herself like this was a show and she knew the next act. You think you win because you made him sign something? We'll build again, with or without you. I looked at her and saw a young woman staring at a locked door. Angry at the wood. You can build whatever you like. I said, just pay for it yourselves. Veronica's mouth pinched. Some people don't understand advancement. They insist on dragging others back to where they came from. Advancement. As if wherever I stood was a crime scene. She didn't understand that sometimes the only way forward is through the truth you refuse to buy. Mike kept signing, page after page, each initial a tiny undoing. When he reached the last page, the clerk turned it toward him. Sign here, full name. He hesitated and then wrote it, Michael Arthur Cole. The letters staggered. At the period, his hand shook once. The door opened behind us and a pair of tourists in the wrong hallway peeked in before a guard redirected them. One of them, an American with a camera ready, backed up slow and, God bless accidental chroniclers, his lens caught the end of what needed catching. Mike pushed the papers a fraction of an inch away from himself. As if distance could dilute ink. He looked at me, finally, and tried on his oldest word. Mom, he said, low and raw. I don't know when I lost myself. I didn't cry. I didn't touch him. I kept my posture like a woman who has learned that slumping invites pity and pity is a poor meal. You didn't lose yourself, I said. You traded yourself for something shiny. Now the shine is gone and you think absence is loss. It's not. It's inventory. Bree scoffed loud enough to mark the moment on the recording. This is pathetic. Forgive him, old woman. Isn't that what you people do? Bleed love until there's nothing left? I turned to her. I didn't take anything from him. I said, the sentence I had practiced for 3 days. The sentence I would be willing to be quoted on by strangers. I stopped him from taking from me. The tourist's camera caught that line. Later, someone would post it with captions and hearts and opinions. People would call me strong, cruel, righteous, bitter. They would say I taught a lesson. They would say I destroyed my own. They would say all the things people say when it isn't their name on the forms. The clerk gathered the pages, counted them, slid a copy into a thin folder, and handed it to Mike. You will receive additional instructions by email, she said. You are to report to the designated office upon re-entry to the United States. She nodded to me. Copy will be placed in the complainant's file. You may both go. Bree stood in a rush, chair legs screeching. Are we done here? She said. Already halfway to the door. Veronica followed, spine rigid with offended decorum. They didn't look back. I didn't expect them to. Some people can't afford the truth in their eyes. Mike didn't move. He stared at the folder like it might tell him a different story if he blinked slowly enough. Then he stood, pocketed the pen, old habit, and put it back on the table. Corrected by memory, he faced me in the doorway of a room that felt like a machine. I don't have anyone, he said. Not accusation, not even a plea, just a sentence without furniture. You have yourself, I said. You'll have to learn how to live with him. We walked out into the bright common area. The guard returned my scarf pin and my phone. Sam touched my elbow lightly. Are you all right? And I answered with a nod that said right enough. Bree and Veronica were already gone. Fast walkers when bills arrive. At the bottom of the embassy steps, we stopped. Rome was loud and uninterested. People moved around us to get to wherever their schedules had promised them meaning. A bus hissed. Tourists argued over a map with a confidence they hadn't earned. A child demanded gelato in a voice that would one day ask for other things. This is where we part, I said. Mike's mouth trembled, then remembered itself. Do you? He started over. Can I do anything? Yes, I said. You can live with what you did and make it count for something. I handed him a thick yellow envelope I had carried across the ocean. Pictures, I said. The first ones. Your first steps. Your first letter to Santa. A note I wrote last night. Not to save you, so you can't say no one told you. He took the envelope like it weighed more than paper. It did. He pressed it to his chest and closed his eyes for a heartbeat. I love you, he said, because he remembered the script. I know, I said, because I remembered the truth. That's why I did this. I turned, pinned my scarf, and walked into the city without a backward glance. I didn't count the steps. I didn't narrate my courage. I just moved the way a woman moves when the work is done and the next work has already started. Behind me, a camera lens caught the end of us and began to tell strangers who we were. Ahead of me, a door opened on a bus and I climbed in, sat by the window, and let Rome pass like any other city. Stone, glass, faces. My hands were empty and steady. My name was mine again. My silence had done its job. Justice is not loud when it arrives. It signs, it stamps, it files, and then it leaves you standing in the daylight with nothing in your pockets but dignity. And if you hold still long enough, you can feel the weight of that, light and heavy at the same time, like a key you forgot you owned. Warm in your palm. I didn't take a victory lap when I got back. I took the bus. Los Angeles greeted me like it always does, sideways. Distracted, honest in the ways that don't make postcards. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and set my bag down without turning on a single light. The house smelled like itself, old wood, lemon cleaner, a little dust that refuses to be shamed. I touched the arm of my chair, hung my scarf on the hook, and listened to the quiet check my pulse. Betty knocked an hour later, then didn't knock again when I didn't answer. That's the difference between neighbors and friends. Neighbors ask. Friends assume you'll come when the soup cools. I slept that first night like a person who'd checked the locks twice. In the morning I made tea and opened the red notebook. Embassy done. I wrote. Name restored. Silence intact. Then I took a slow walk up the block and back, counting the cracks in the sidewalk because numbers have always comforted me more than prayers. The first bag appeared on the third day. Brown paper turning translucent where the grease met it. I saw it through the screen door. Donuts. A half dozen from the shop 3 blocks down where the glaze is too sweet and the owner always calls you boss as if what you carry is heavier than it looks. No note, no knock, just the bag, warm enough to tell me whoever left it had not yet learned to wait. I didn't open the door. I stood a foot away and looked at it the way you look at a stray dog, gentle. Wary. The old habit in my hand reached for the knob. I put that hand on the wall instead. He didn't come to see his mother. He came to see if she was still standing. By noon, the bag was cool. By evening, it was for the birds. The kids next door found it and ran down the steps laughing. Sugar already on their lips. I watched from the window and didn't correct their manners. I am done teaching lessons that don't ask for me. The next day, the same. A small bouquet this time, grocery store flowers. Stems trimmed with a knife not meant for stems. Rubber band still on. No note. I put water in an old jar and set the jar on the porch beside the arrangement I didn't bring in. Let the house decide whether to accept them. It didn't. People like to think apology is a sentence. In real life, it's a season. It comes with weather. It fails, then tries again. It gets embarrassed. It gets hungry. It shows up with donuts because language has become too expensive. He came at the same hour the following week. The same careful steps on the loose board I never fixed. He didn't ring the bell. He put a bag down and walked away fast. Shoulders squared in a way that said I am not running. I sat just inside the door and counted to 100 while his footsteps thinned down the block. After a few days, I stopped counting and listened to the silence after him. I liked that better. It told the truth more quietly. Linda brought mail and checked the batteries in my smoke detector because some kindnesses look like chores. She glanced at the porch and then at me. Asking without asking. Let it be, I said. She nodded. She knows inventory by instinct. Every so often Betty would leave a pie on my kitchen table. She has a key. Earned with time. She'd say, he's been by, and I'd say, I know, and that was the whole conversation. In neighborhoods like ours, love is a rumor when it's loud and a fact when it's quiet. The flowers turned to different flowers. Once, a small towel, hotel white with a faint embroidery where it had lived before, folded in half in a way that said he'd tried. Another time, a paperback left on the step. Corners bent. A story about a man who learns too late what everybody else already knows. I picked that one up and put it on the shelf. Not because I wanted to read it. Because I wanted to remember the attempt without smelling it. I didn't hate him at the door. Hate is a noisy tenant and the lease was up. I felt something colder and cleaner. I felt the line hold. On the 7th morning of this routine, I opened my door just as he reached the gate. He froze like a deer. Then remembered he was a man and straightened. Mike, I said, and the name was a stone placed carefully in a garden. He didn't cross the walk. He didn't look me in the eye long enough to drown in it. He lifted the bag in his hand, as if this object could explain him. Then he set it down on the step and backed away like he was leaving evidence in a case he wasn't qualified to argue. He opened his mouth, decided against whatever lived there, and nodded once. Thank you, I said, because courtesy is free and doesn't alter the terms. He swallowed and left. When the block turned him into nobody, I sat on the top step. The bag was warm. I let it cool. Birds would come later. Things find their level. People will ask where forgiveness is in this part of the story. Forgiveness is a house with many rooms. I wasn't ready to open any of them. I was sweeping the hallway first. The video from the embassy started breathing its own life around then, strangers online typing sermons in the comments. Choosing sides like teams existed for something that had only ever been a family. Some called me a queen. Some called me a monster. I sat with the television off. Praise and blame are just costumes for the same audience. Neither of them puts food on your table. The clinic called to confirm an appointment I didn't make. I told them no and wrote no in the notebook big enough to hear my own spine answer back. I read over the will I'd drafted and added a line about the chair. The chair deserved paperwork. It had witnessed as much as any person. I underlined a sentence in my letter to Mike and then crossed it out because it was too generous. I rewrote it plain. Generosity without clarity is just another trap. Evenings, I sat on the porch because the porch makes a witness of whoever chooses it. Children played on the sidewalk, inventing rules that changed when the score did. A man across the street washed his car for the third time in a week. Not for cleanliness but for control. A cat I didn't know adopted my steps as an afternoon bed. The city was itself, not better. Not worse. I matched my breath to its noise and felt my body agree. One afternoon, a different bag appeared, a small brown sack with a clear window. Inside 2 plain rolls and a note-sized absence. He had tried not writing and succeeded. This was progress. A man who stops explaining becomes someone you can believe eventually. I considered opening the door and saying something simple like I see you or something hard like I still love you. And that's the problem. I did neither. Some lessons need a locked door to echo properly. At night I dreamed of water. Not oceans, rivers. The kind that remember their path even when men try to straighten them. In the dream I stood on a bank with my hands empty and approved of the direction. That's how I knew I was healing in the ways that mattered. On Sunday, church music drifted from a radio 2 houses down. The voices rose like they were reaching for a roof that wouldn't come down to meet them. I hummed the harmony because it's the only part I've ever trusted. Faith has always been a matter of intervals for me, what you can sing between the notes other people demand. He kept coming. I kept not opening. We were both doing the hardest thing we'd ever done, he. Going away after coming near, me. Staying near after staying gone. In that standstill, something like honesty began to grow. I couldn't see it yet, but I could feel the pressure change. I wrote 1 sentence at the bottom of a clean page in the red notebook. If he wants to meet his mother again, he will have to arrive as a man. I closed the book and set it on the table beside the yellow envelope I'd carried back from Rome, emptied now of photos. Heavy now with air that knew. That evening, the porch had no bag. The steps were bare. The air cooler than the calendar promised. I waited longer than usual. Not for him, not for donuts, but for the feeling that tells you a season has earned its next chapter. When it came, it didn't feel like a door opening. It felt like a window finally remembering it could. I went inside, turned on the lamp, and took out the letter I'd been writing for weeks, the one with no room for metaphors. The one that ends a kind of motherhood and begins another kind of mercy. I signed my name and sealed the envelope addressed to him with a single word, for Mike. I set it on the table where he would find it if I wasn't here to hand it to him. Then I made tea and listened to the house exhale. The porch was empty. The night was honest. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to relief, not because anything was mended, but because everything was named. Tomorrow would ask for the last of my courage. I had measured it, and it was enough. I didn't plan to die on a Tuesday. But death doesn't check calendars. I woke that morning with a strange sense of completion. The way you feel when you've washed the last dish and turned off the kitchen light. My bones ached differently, not with illness claws. This was something gentler, a letting go. I sat in my armchair. The one that had seen everything, birthdays, betrayals, hunger, silence. I placed 2 things on my lap, the red notebook and the sealed letter, for Mike. I wore my softest shawl. Not because I was cold, but because certain departures deserve ceremony, even if no one is there to witness it. I didn't write anything new. Everything that needed ink already had it. Instead, I whispered a single sentence to the room. I release myself. The clock ticked. The house held its breath. Somewhere beyond the window, a child laughed. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and in that stillness, I felt my name, my true, unborrowed name, settle back into my body. That's how they found me. Peaceful, present, gone. Neighbors tell it differently, depending on what they carry in their own chests. Betty says I looked like I was listening to music. Linda says I looked like I had just finished praying. The doctor said it was quiet, which is a word most people don't get to have beside their death. They kept the lights low during the wake. No gold caskets. No lilies from strangers. Only flowers from the park. And pies from Betty. And children's drawings left on the stoop. A woman with no money left this world wealthier than some bankers. And my son finally arrived. He came late. He always did. He didn't wear a suit. He didn't make excuses. He walked through neighbors without asking permission. Moved slow. And knelt beside me. They say he took my hand and held it to his forehead the way some men hold their last prayer. He opened the envelope addressed to, for Mike. They say he read it twice, and then folded it like something sacred. This is what the letter said. My son, love is not a debt. It is an inheritance you must decide to keep. I cannot forgive you while I am alive, because forgiveness would only feed your denial. But if you ever change, if you ever choose truth over pride, then let my absence be permission. Not to grieve, but to grow. Don't look for me at my grave. Look for me in every woman you do not take from. In every mouth you choose not to lie to. In every hand you decide to help without asking what it owes you. That is where I'll be. That is how you will earn me back. He didn't cry out loud. They said, he cried the way I once did, silent, shaking, ashamed to breathe. He took one photograph, the one where he is 5 years old and holding a wooden toy truck I carved from scraps, and left the rest. He didn't move into the house. He sat on the porch. Every day, not to claim it, to understand it. A week later, Betty passed by and found him repairing the loose step. Not to live there. Just to leave it better than he found it. My house lives without me. They tell me, in the way the dead are told things, that he still visits. He waters my roses. He brings leftover bread from the corner bakery and gives it to the kids on bikes. He speaks little. He looks tired, but not lost. One neighbor swears she heard him sigh once, sitting in my chair, and say, I am my mother's son. I finally know what that costs. I don't need that to be true. It's enough that someone heard it. If you are listening to my story, remember this. Love is not weakness. Silence is not surrender. Forgiveness is not forgetting, it is choosing what you refuse to carry. Some will tell you I was harsh. Some will call me holy. I was neither. I was simply a woman who stopped begging to be seen. If you are a mother, I pray you are never erased. If you are a child, I pray you never learn your lesson at a funeral. And if you are standing in the doorway between hurt and healing, may you find the courage to lock the door? And still leave the light on. Thank you for listening. If this story stayed in your chest longer than it stayed in your ears, you carry it now. And that is enough.